My guest today is Osama Malik, a principal with Booz Allen Hamilton. Osama, welcome to the program today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're here to talk about cloud really as a game changer in both the public and private sectors in terms of information sharing, cost savings, efficiencies, things like that. When you look at the federal side, talk to me about where cloud adoption is today.
Yeah, so we kind of have a pretty wide field. You've got folks who are really out in front, call them the trailblazers, and they're implementing, modern new architectures, partnering with startup companies, and kind of doing things at the pace of the commercial world, and really doing some new things. You got another camp of folks who are, they're watching, they're kind of on the fence. They might be making some safe moves into the cloud, but they're really kind of watching to see how things fold out and unravel, right? And then you've got some other pockets of the government where they're server hugging, right? And they are really resistant to moving, and in some cases for good reason, and for other cases it's has to do with training and education, culture, those kinds of things. So It's a pretty wide field.
So between those three, where do you see most of the agencies falling in terms of where they might lie on one of those three categories, and what puts them in a certain category?
Sure. So I think it has a little bit to do with the different sectors of the government. So if you think about DoD, they are right now on the fence. There is a lot of movement that's happened over the past few years where they have been consolidating some massive data centers and kind of developing these private cloud environments and moving to those. And then you've got some of the recent cloud service providers that have actually started to get the right kind of accreditations and the security measures in place to give the confidence for those agencies to start using them for some of the less classified types of uses. So they're starting to watch those. You're starting to see some movement there. On the civilian side, I think particularly where agencies are focused on citizen services, they're really pushing forward and leaning out because they're essentially competing. Think about CMS and healthcare.gov, and the fact that they just went through their third open enrollment, right? And they weren't in the news. That was a big deal, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that they really doubled down on moving to the cloud and leveraging a lot of modern new technologies and practices and architectures to support that. And then you've got other pockets where it's just a really big cultural shift, right? So the intelligence community, for example, they're doing some really big movements, and they've got a lot of things in place to accelerate over the next couple of years into the cloud. But we are still seeing just a culture that is, decades and decades old of really not sharing information, really protecting that, keeping it locked down to a device in a room. And now to be able to say, hey, we're going to share this, and you'll have access to it, but you won't be able to see the device where it's stored, and other people might have access to it as well. That's been a challenge just culturally for them to kind of come around to.
And with a cloud-first mandate, we're going in that direction one way or the other, right?
That's right. And a lot of credit goes to the leadership in government in all of those sectors, defense, intelligence community, and civilian agencies as well, because they're really understanding the value proposition that can be achieved with cloud, not just from a cost savings or performance, but also the ability to create these platforms for new value to be able to be created against whatever an agency's mission is. And so, that top-down leadership, and I think also kind of a rise of a more tech-savvy workforce as they're coming up through the ranks as well, right? Those two things are starting to meet in the middle. And I think we're looking at an exciting next few years ahead of us.
You mentioned on the civilian side some of the citizen services. I get the sense that they are almost trailblazers in their own right simply because of the citizen demand on that, right? The people that use those services, they're the ones that are saying, hey, this is what we want and we won't accept anything less.
That's right. I mean, if you think about it today, we've got citizens who are on their mobile devices, on their TVs, they're in their cars, and they get a set of services to help them run their lives, right? Their personal lives, and those experiences that they get are personalized for them. They're convenient. They're multi-channel. They know where they are. They're anticipating what they need. They're serving up the right content for them for what they want, right? And they're starting to expect that everywhere they go. And it doesn't, shifting gears and saying, well, but I'm interacting with the government now, so it's okay for me to have a, 1990s kind of technology interaction with the government, but then when I come home, I expect something different. They're really starting to expect that kind of digital, life when they interact with the government as well.
Certainly, and I think you also brought up a good point about the tech-savvy workers. Not only do the customers, if you will, want that technology and that capability, but the young millennials that are being hired to replace the retirees, they also have the same requirements.
They do, and not just in delivering the work that they're doing, but in the way that they're interacting with the technology and the tools and the citizens or the customers that they're serving, right? And so from a retention perspective, from a training perspective, from even just the way, think about these agencies that have, Twitter accounts now, right? It's like, what kind of controls and governance do you need to have in place so that you don't have somebody junior say something, but you also need them to be interacting and reacting at the speed of which discussions are happening online. So where's that balance point, that tension point? It's very interesting.
It's a great point. It is a balance that needs to be considered. What are the buying patterns that you're seeing when it relates to this?
Yeah, so I like to think of it as, I use an analogy of buying a new house. And so you've got agencies that are just at different points in their journey. And so in some instances, there are folks who are looking for help to just say, hey, do I love what I have or do I need to leave it, right? And I need help to figure out, does the existing IT landscape that I have today, which might have some cloud, some legacy types of application stacks or a mix, they're trying to figure out what is a reason for me to potentially go somewhere else or do something different. What's the business value? And so we've got sort of that real estate agent type of a role that we can play. Other agencies, they've decided, hey, I'm going to do something new, and they got to figure out, well, what does that new thing look like? What's important to me, right? Am I going to build something new? Am I going to go move into a space that I can rent and subscribe on an as-a-service basis? And they've got to figure out what the right different options are. It's not just like I'm going to move to one town or one type of architecture, right? There's a whole lot of options, and that's always changing. And so there's that element of it as well. Then there's folks who are made those decisions, and they're actually trying to migrate and transition. So, they've got to think about moving. What kind of furniture or applications or services or data do I have? What do I want to bring with me? What might need a change in order for it to make sense in the new house or new environment that I'm moving into? And then, hey, maybe there's some things that I need to leave where they are because it's safer here, because it's going to break if I move it and I need that to keep working, right? And so there's a whole bunch of decisions that need to get made around that. And then when you get into this new environment, there's the experience, right? So we also kind of tend to play this decorator experience type role where we're in this new environment, and the things that I used to do, like in a smart home, right, are going to be different than they were in my previous home. And so we help think about new experiences, new furniture, new technologies, new applications, new services, even though they might do similar things that they did before, but there's a whole new way to provide those that are optimized for the kind of environment that they're in. And so, we got this whole spectrum, and we're kind of helping across all of these different things, but typically there are people who are looking at modernizing their platform and infrastructure, and what kind of house do I want to be in. You've got folks who are looking at, hey, how do I build new things for this new environment and create that interactive, modern, DevOps style, application services and digital products. And then you've got folks who are looking at, hey, how do I manage and run this new environment, right? So going back to kind of that home analogy, right? If you had a home and you know how to manage that, and your skills in the household is kind of expert at running that kind of home, you move someplace that now has a pool and you didn't have a pool before, well, that's new skill sets that you need to do. It's new expenses you need to think about. And so there's a transformation of the culture and the workforce that kind of permeates out in addition to all the technical stuff.
I want to get into the security piece too. We have about a minute left before we go to break, but start on that conversation with me and talk to me about the security considerations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that over the past 5 years, that's been kind of the single biggest reason that folks have said, hey, we're hesitant to, or we want to be reluctant to move to cloud. And I think that over the last 2 years, we've seen some really big steps from a lot of the cloud service providers out there in terms of, one, educating the community about what does security in the cloud mean, but also around establishing and getting some standards like FedRAMP and being able to certify certain levels of security, at least at the cloud infrastructure level, for those offerings. So I think that those things are really starting to make that, but I do think that there's some red herrings out there still in terms of what happens once you're in the cloud and security, and what does that mean?
Sure, and I think we can pick up on that on the next segment as well.
Sounds good.
We're going to pause here for a short break. My guest today is Osama Malik. He is a principal with Booz Allen Hamilton on Cloud Trends, What's Ahead for Government, sponsored by Booz Allen. I'm your host, Jason Fornicola, and you're listening to federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.